So, how do you introduce a podcast exactly? This is my fourth time tonight, and I just got into an argument about whether we could say our age. I guess I'm just putting all the dirty laundry out there, Hunter. So, why don't you intro us the way we should be introduced?
You're overthinking
That
it.
would be like attractive to the kids that are going to listen to this podcast.
Yeah. We want the kids to tune in because we're. Hi, first, welcome to It's Like Poetry, It Rhymes. This is going to be a highly original movie podcast where two dudes talk about movies online. No one's ever heard that before, and so you need to listen to us. And I want you to listen to us, which is why I was criticizing how our intro should go.
It's actually kind of original because I'm black and he's white. So, like, you have that whole racial divide.
Whoa. Oh, my God.
No, it's great because there's actually, like, a lot of stuff I wanted to cover today. Like, how one of the movies we're reviewing is really black. And it involves somebody calling someone else a honky.
Honky Paradise, brother.
And it's just something that I wouldn't expect before. And I think that our race would matter when it comes to that, you know?
Yeah.
And let me say this, and I think our age would matter too, because Hunter and I have known each other for a while, and can I talk about something kind of weird for a second? Like, this is why I really love movies. The first movie that we saw at somebody's house was, like, actually Pulp Fiction. I had seen the movie, like, in and out of order over the years, but, like, that was my first time seeing the whole movie beginning to start. And not to be, like, weird or whatever, but I'm gonna jump right into it. A lot of times when I was a kid, I was called the N-word and whatnot, like a little kid. And I remember when I was, like, 10 or 11, I was on YouTube, and I saw the Dead Nigger Storage clip. And I saw that with no context, Hunter. I knew who Samuel L. Jackson was, but I did not know Quentin Tarantino. Like, it's not the movie we're discussing, but I wanted to kind of introduce why I like movies, because the reason why I brought it up is because clearly I grow up disliking the N-word, you being used as a slur. But I remember watching a clip of this movie, and Quentin Tarantino calls the most threatening black man in existence nigger. No, he doesn't call him nigger. He calls his garage, like, Dead Nigger Storage, like 6 or 7 different times. And the black guy just sits there and takes it while the other white guy in the room is, like, laughing at him. And I remember watching this scene at, like, 9 years old and not being offended. I was like, Quentin Tarantino has a point. Why is he bringing dead niggers here? And I guess one thing I kind of wanted to discuss is, like, I learned in that movie that words only mean what value you attribute to them. I don't like being called the N-word. I don't like white people saying it. But in the context, it was appropriate to use the N-word, and it was amusing and not at all offensive, even if it was being used as a slur. And I guess movies just kind of taught me nuance. That's what I'm trying to get at. Movies teach you nuance. Mm-hmm. You take over. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a weird place to have taken that particular line in Pulp Fiction and to have arrived at this place. But I think I get what you're saying, in that if the art is good enough, which it definitely is in Pulp Fiction, then you kind of just can't critique it, because it's like, it is what it is, and it works because it just works. Like, I can't and I won't try and defend that line, especially as I've gotten older. It's harder for me as a white guy to try and, like, I do kind of cringe when I hear it now, in a way. Like, I'm sure in high school I just laughed.
Yeah.
But now, like, I do kind of, it's so it's so unnecessary, but it also just adds so much, like, texture and richness and color to that.
Color?
No pun intended, to that movie. Like, it's just a funny thing, and it's only he has the balls to, like, put that in there. And, you know, for better or worse, it's a thing. And I think what you've been able to take from it, which, you know, I can't add anything onto your understanding of that moment. So, like, whatever you've taken from it, it is what it is, and that's awesome.
I mean, you can tell me what you think of me taking from it, but I understand. And I think that Hunter's opinion is equally valid about these matters. No, but like that's my point. Everybody takes different things from movies, and that's what we like to discuss.
If you can read one full page of a Harry Potter book, nigga, I'll give $750,000 to whatever charitable organization you want to.
That's like poetry. They rhyme.
So the point of this episode, and I think for the podcast going forward, is we want to have some angle on the movies that we discuss. It will sometimes probably just be one movie, like if it's new and we're just doing a straightforward review. But sometimes, like this, we want to kind of compare and contrast at least, two. So today we will be talking about the 3 film adaptations of the novel I Am Legend. The book was written by Richard Matheson in 1954, I think. And so there have been 3 movies of it. The first one was with Vincent Price, and it came out in the 60s, I think 64, and it's called The Last Man on Earth. And then the next one was The Omega Man, which came out in
71.
And then they took a big long break between 71 and 2007, which is when the Will Smith I Am Legend came out, which is the only one that holds the exact same name as the source novel that it was based on. So, yeah, they're all pretty different, similar in some ways, but we'll be talking about all 3 because we thought that doesn't exist on the internet yet, just comparing and contrasting all 3 of them. And it was good to gain more familiarity with the older 2.
I've never read the book, Hunter. I don't think you have either, right?
No,
But
of course not.
When you think of, like, they say they're vampires, right? Not to get ahead. They say they're vampires, but in my opinion, these are something like zombie movies. And when you think of zombie movies, you think that the progenitor of the zombie movies is George Romero, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but in my opinion, the whole genre of like the undead, it goes even further back to like Dracula and vampires. But this book by Matheson, I Am Legend, I feel like it kind of kickstarted the like lone survivor in the apocalypse subgenre that has ended in things like The Last of Us, Walking Dead, even George Romero movies. I feel like all of these movies were influenced by this novel because it's about this guy who's the last man on earth facing a horde of undead. They're called vampires. I'm saying undead because I feel like they're also kind of like zombies, but he's facing these zombies in the apocalypse and he's the last man on earth and he has to struggle with that. And all these movies have in common is that he does run into humanity at some point in the film, but in all of these movies, for the most part, they spent the first good half of the movie with him alone. And my question to you, Hunter, is when it comes to these movies, which one of them was your favorite when it comes to exploring man being alone in the face of the apocalypse?
I'd probably say I Am Legend for sure. The graphics for handling the empty New York City are still pretty great. They still hold up, even though the movie's, 2007, what's that, like 15 years ago? Yeah, so there's a lot of focus put on Will Smith being alone with his dog in the city. And it's a fine movie overall. Like, it's good, it's entertaining, but for what the original story is, and I'll talk more about this later, but I think the message of the original story and the reason that it gets the title I Am Legend, it kind of just sidesteps that whole thing. And so when I watch I Am Legend, I do think that that's kind of the most enjoyable part of the movie is you as the viewer, instead of thinking about any big societal questions, that better sci-fi might put in your mind. Instead, when I watch I Am Legend, the only questions I'm left with are kind of like, well, how would I spend my time if I was alone in Manhattan? Like, which department stores would I raid, and where would I play golf from? Like, which aircrafts?
You said you'd like go to the MoMA or something, right? You said you'd be rating art.
Sure, yeah, like ride a skateboard down the Guggenheim ramp. I don't know. And that's something I thought would be cool. We can talk about that. The rating art thing. I'm convinced that that Will Smith has been raiding the art museums and taking them back to his apartment. And the movie, at least two of the movies show this. They show the classic art in his apartment, and neither of them discuss it. And like they show Van Gogh's and hanging on his walls. And so at first, in the Vincent Price movie, I just assumed like maybe that's his kitschy taste in home decorating. Like they're prints, they're not the real thing. And then with the Will Smith movie, I'm like, well, he is living in Manhattan, so I bet those are the real things. His apartment would be the most safe place in New York, so he's trying to protect the culture. And I do think that that's interesting, that, the idea that at some point in this apocalypse journey, he's taken days off from trying to go around and clear out every building of vampires. Instead, he's devoted days to just going and trying to, protect society's like most beloved culture.
It honestly feels like an open world RPG in that regard.
Yeah, those would be the side quest days.
Oh, yeah. I downloaded mine online, and I downloaded the alternate ending, and that actually gave me a different perspective than you, I think, because I feel like, okay, so like when you look at all of these movies, there are cues that all of the main characters in all three movies may be wrong that you can pick up on. And I feel like you can only really pick up on it in your second watch after you know how the ending is. But like in the I Am Legend version that I downloaded, they made an alternate ending. It showed that when the zombies stormed the house, they were just trying to get the girl that he had kidnapped in the first act. And then he realizes that, and he like goes out to the zombie and he gives them the girl, and then they just leave him alone and don't kill him. Mm-hmm. And then when you watch I Am Legend, there are a lot of scenes that kind of show that the zombies are sentient. Specific scenes where you see that clearly these zombies are displeased with Will Smith's behavior. And I mention all this to say, and I don't know if you noted this, Hunter, but in the first two movies, the undead kept screaming, "Come out, come out." They were trying to goad him into coming out. And it was really creepy and it was really weird, but it only really worked because these movies were made in the 60s and 70s, where he's listening to these creatures and he's scared and he doesn't want to like go outside because they're calling to him. If zombies were yelling for Will Smith to come out in any movie made post 1990, it would have been cheesy, right? Or hokey, whatever word you use, like when it don't work anymore.
Yeah. So my theory isn't so much that like they had to make them more animalistic zombies because the alternative would have been cheesy. My theory is that once they got Will Smith on board at this particular time in his career, that he was really on his like, I need to be a symbol of positive masculinity thing. Like he's been on that for a while.
Since Pursuit of Happiness.
Yeah. This came like right after Pursuit of Happiness, basically, and was also a Christmas release. I always remembered this as like a summer blockbuster, but no, like if you look it up on IMDb,
it's a Christmas release.
I Am Legend, yeah, it was like a December release, just like Pursuit of Happiness. It was one of just like 7 Pounds. Think of like a Will Smith trilogy of like Pursuit of Happiness, I Am Legend, and 7 Pounds.
Will Smith battles toxic masculinity in new trilogy.
Yes, exactly. So I really think that the reason they chose to make the undead in this movie the way they are, and, much less communicative than in the other two adaptations, is probably just so that Will Smith could be the de facto hero. And that makes it less interesting to me, because apparently in the original novel, they are more of a civilization or an advanced...
This is what I wanted to talk about, actually. In the first two movies, both of these zombies are a civilization and a representation of the boogeyman at the time. These creatures, it was a criticism about society, and honestly... correct me if I'm wrong, this is some Hotep shit, but I really do think a lot of it had to do with like civil rights, and a lot of it was like racial allegory. I say that because in the second one, most of the secondary characters are actually black. And let me go back to the first one. Maybe you could say the first one is more so about sexism, because Vincent Price really shakes the shit out of so many women in this movie, and he's really egotistical and egomaniacal. And in the second movie, Charlton Heston, he has a black girlfriend. A lot of the secondary characters are black, but he's more so trying to save them and get them to leave and be safe. He's honestly, out of all of these movies, he's the most straightforward moral protagonist. But I guess I do want to talk about the second movie for a second, when it talks to like these zombies having a civilization. But what did you think about the family? And do you think there's a chance that it might have been a parallel to Charles Manson in a way?
Could be. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That was in the 60s, right? So
yeah, and this was in like 71.
71, yeah. Could be. It was very kind of on the nose how cartoonishly like villainous they were portrayed. They all wore black robes and they were all white and they all had, the creepy contact lenses. They were very like typical idea of vampires. They were definitely the most advanced of any of the monsters in any of the movies, any of the undead of these three movies. But this film overall spent the most time with them. But yeah, there's definitely some 70s like blaxploitation vibes to it.
Yes, I was gonna say that. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times I didn't think that the music really fit. Like for instance, the one that stood out to me was when he gets kidnapped or when he gets captured by the family and they're taking him to the middle of that stadium to like burn him or, put him to death basically. The music's doing this kind of poppy, bouncy thing, which sounded to me like what you would hear when, like if you're watching a Western and the cavalry's riding across the plains. I don't know. It had that kind of bounce to it, and it was supposed to be like a scary kind of creepy moment. So there's a lot of these weird moments where the exploitation 70s vibes kind of mix with this classic Charlton Heston traditionalism, which I'm sure he was a very traditional dude. Like he was, he's Mr.
He was like the president of the NRA, dude.
Exactly. Yeah. He's Mr. like, you will have to pry my guns out of my cold dead hands guy. And then all the talk about God in the movie was pretty on the nose too. Like when the little girl asks him, "Are you God?" after she just met him. So I'm still trying to process all that because I didn't exactly love that stuff. Once his cure once the vaccine that he's been working on has been shown to work, that other guy that he meets up with, gets all excited and he's like, "Oh, we're going to be like Adam and Eve. Like we're going to be, the second round of Adam and Eve, only this time we aren't going to be tempted by no snake either." It's just some little things like that.
It did feel weird. I noticed that stuff, but it didn't bother me. But like my thing is I like blaxploitation films. I like that stuff. So I mean like,
yeah, I can see how it might actually be most people's favorite. If people were to just pick any of these to watch, Omega Man is a pretty wild ride. It's goofy, it's campy, it's got some, like we've said, it's got some blaxploitation vibes to it. The villains play a much bigger role in it than they do in the other movies.
There's a lot of nudity too. I'm surprised you didn't mention that. There is a lot of nudity in this film. Charlton Heston meets this black chick, and you meet her. Okay, so he meets her, and she's literally posing in a mannequin store doing a mannequin challenge. And it's so funny because they set up the shot. He's going through the mannequin store, and then the music starts going, and then he looks over, and there's like this black woman in the distance with a big afro, and she's posed. She's posed as a mannequin, and then they keep cutting back to his face and then cutting back to her, slowly zooming in, and then she just looks at him and she like runs out and he chases her, and it's weirdly funny. He ends up sleeping with her. There's full-on nudity. There's full-on nudity like 2 or 3 times in the movie.
Just that one scene. But by 2 or 3 times, you mean it cuts back to her. But yeah, it's just her sitting on the bed there.
No, you saw her breasts like 3 different times in the movie, and then you saw her butt. I'm saying it was a lot of nudity for a movie that came out in 1971 and starring the guy that made the 10 Commandments, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true. I was surprised by that. And actually, like, this is totally just me presuming things about Charlton Heston that I don't know if they're even true or not. But like I say, I see him embodying a kind of like conservative traditionalism. And so as I was watching the movie and it was becoming clearer and clearer that this, black woman is going to be the love interest, when they first go in for a kiss, they're about to kiss, and then it's interrupted because, like, the vampire family is attacking, and so they don't have the kiss. And I'm watching that, and I'm like, I wonder if this white man is about to go this whole movie and not actually kiss this black lady on screen. Like for 1971, for his fan base, like, I don't know. I'm just assuming. But, like, would that have been a big deal? I don't know. And so I did have my eye on that. Like, how close are they actually going to get in this movie, and how much will this relationship just be hinted? And, I mean, eventually they do kiss, but I think even then, because, again, I was thinking about this stuff when I watched it, you do just kind of see the back of his head as they like embrace and kiss. It's not like you see lips lock or anything. So I guess an argument could be made that they didn't or they faked it. I don't know. And for all I know, I'm not familiar with every Charlton Heston movie. For all I know, he's been with a billion women of a billion different colors across his career. Like, who knows? Who cares? It was just something I thought was interesting that Mr. President of the NRA is paired with a black lady with an afro in this movie.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is because you're not wrong. I was really shocked when he kissed her. And I even think the implication that they had sex and that they kissed would be enough to offend anybody in his audience.
So yeah, that was just something that I noticed about Omega Man. It is a wild movie, like I said a few minutes ago. It's kind of the most action-packed, maybe, as far as things still happening or continuing to happen, and it doesn't get too deep into the drama of it all, whereas I Am Legend, yes, there's a lot of action, but it's Will Smith's Christmas release where he's fighting toxic masculinity. So it's trying to be a drama primarily. There are a lot more close-ups of him crying and, sleeping in a bathtub with his dog and putting his dog down. And it's more of a drama. If you're looking for just fun, human man battles vampires, if you're looking for that movie, then it's Omega Man for you.
I agree with Hunter about Omega Man being more action-packed, more fun. It honestly feels like a B movie. It's really clever. There are a lot of dumb racist jokes. Like, there's this scene where the black chick is talking about how she wants to see a stream with fish in it, and Charlton Heston is like, "You ever seen a stream with fish in it in Harlem?" And it's just a lot of dumb shit like that. It's honestly my favorite out of the 3 movies. And I feel like we're going to talk about the Vincent Price movie more, but wrapping up this Omega Man conversation, I find myself comparing it to I Am Legend because I think it's the most similar. There are just a couple things I noticed, like there's a scene where Charlton Heston's car breaks down and he buys a new car and he pretends to have a conversation with the car salesman while he's buying the car. Also, there's a scene where he has his bust in his home that he plays chess with, that he has conversations with. There's even a scene where he's with mannequins and he's having conversations with mannequins. And I was wondering, do you think that I Am Legend borrowed the most from the Omega Man when it comes to plot and motifs? I noticed a lot of similarities between the two.
I wonder, I don't remember if the Vincent Price one, the Last Man on Earth, I don't remember if there was mannequin stuff involved in that one too, but if there was, then I would just kind of wonder if it was like from the book originally.
Yeah, we should have read the book, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we should have read the book. I mean, but I'm so glad we didn't. And honestly, like, no, listeners, give us props. We're doing 3 movies for our first episode, and there's no guarantee of a built-in audience or anything. Like, we're doing the most out here. And so, yeah, who cares if we didn't read the book? We watched 3 whole movies for this one episode.
Well, actually, like, speaking of reading the book, there were a lot of things that I saw in Last Man on Earth and I Am Legend that I knew would have to be from the book, because I get the feeling that the Omega Man was the most radical departure. I can't remember exactly what the sign says, but in all 3 movies, there's a scene when they're driving through the cars, and in the Will Smith and Vincent Price one, there's a sign that they drive by that says something that God is not with us or God is dead. And then there are a lot of scenes of like collapsed bodies and piles of bodies. There are a lot of things that I know are from the books that they introduced in The Last Man on Earth and I Am Legend that was not an Omega Man. And I was wondering if you had noticed stuff like that when you saw, like, is there anything you think might have been from the books that you saw in these movies?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to read something here from the book's Wikipedia page. And so this is the ending of the plot summary, but this is what I find to be the most interesting aspect of the story. The reason that the story has its name, I Am Legend, because again, that's the name of the original book. So the main character in the book and in 2 of the movies, the Will Smith one and the Charlton Heston one, the character's name is Robert Neville. I think the name is slightly changed in the Vincent Price movie, but whatever, it's all the same guy. So this is the Wikipedia plot summary of the ending of the book. It says Robert Neville goes to his prison window and sees the infected staring back at him with the same hatred and fear that he once felt for them. He realizes that he, a remnant of old humanity, is now a legend to the new race born of the infection. He acknowledges that their desire to kill him after he has killed so many of their loved ones is not something he can condemn. As the suicide pills take effect, he is amused by the thought that he will become their new superstition and legend, just as vampires once were to humans. So that plot twist, I think, is the core to the whole thing, or at least the core to the original story, and I find that very interesting. The idea that the last man on Earth realizes that he is not the good guy in all this, that he is actually the legend, the boogeyman to this new society that will be coming up behind humanity as we know it right now. And he just kind of accepts that, kind of, chuckles to himself, and he has kind of a greater understanding. And I don't think any of these 3 movies really present that approach to it. I think all 3 of them have some variation of that Dylan Thomas poem that gets quoted in Interstellar all the time, that rage against the dying of the light, or do not go gently into that good night, like that whole thing. That's kind of the vibe I get from all 3 of these movies. It features these big Hollywood stars in all 3 of them, and we're supposed to root for them to varying degrees. They all have kind of like a savior complex, and all 3 of the movies kind of just want us to accept that. And yeah, there are little things that we can latch on to maybe think otherwise, but I don't think any of the 3 adaptations kind of tackle the ending of the book as it's presented in that Wikipedia plot summary. And that's what I find very interesting about the story. I wish that book's ending would have been represented in some of the movies.
Well, that's the end of our podcast, guys. Hunter didn't like them because they weren't as good as a Wikipedia plot summary that he read in a book. I kind of disagree with you. I disagree with you.
Okay.
But I kind of want to play devil's advocate, man. I disagree with you, except for the first film. I disagree with you because I think the first film really did a great job of capturing that vibe. That scene where Vincent Price vents and rants about how he was trying to save everybody in the church at the end and he dies at the altar. I feel like scenes like those really demonstrate that Vincent Price knew that he was a legend when he dies. Because when he dies, he says, "They're all afraid of me." And I think that he was the best at portraying this character because not only was he a savior, he was egomaniacal, he was arrogant, he was abusive. He hurt the things that he loved. I think you'll notice that every single thing that he loved in that movie, he ended up killing or hurting or abandoning. Or
shaking.
Every single female in this movie, he aggressively shook at least once.
There's a hilarious comparison I sent to Mason as I was rewatching I Am Legend after we had already watched the Vincent Price movie and seen Vincent Price shake women constantly. And then, like 40 years later, you're watching Will Smith, and there's a scene where he really wants to shake this woman, and his hand is like, his fingers are outstretched, like he's so ready to grab her, but then he just doesn't. And you're like, oh yeah, welcome to 2007. It's not the 60s anymore.
No, you can't just shake a woman anymore.
No matter what Chris Rock says.
Yeah, but no, you can't shake a woman anymore. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, even then, like, Will Smith in that scene is shown as bitter and upset and angry that he had failed at his job to save the world. But in the Vincent Price scene where he's shaking that woman, he literally does look like somebody who thinks he knows what's best, and you get this vibe that he is a mad scientist. And I really do stand by this, and I disagree with you so strongly because remember, this is a guy from Thriller. Vincent Price has played a bunch of villains. I think he knew the assignment when he took this role, and I think he portrayed the book perfectly. And I think that when it comes to which book adapted the movie the best, I think you give it to The Last Man on Earth.
Which book adapted the movie? I know what you mean. I'm just being a jerk. Yeah.
Wait, what'd you say?
You said when it comes to which book adapted the movie best, but hey, like, go off. It's okay.
Been smoking.
I think that may just be your intelligence that you bring to watching it, and you're picking up on, like, hey, he's being a crazy person right now, and he's yelling from a church altar, you're freaks.
Symbolism.
Yeah, like, there's lots of symbolism. Yeah, I'm not sure how much was intentional on the filmmaker's part to make him seem like, to make the audience think he's, crazy, like you're saying. If that's there, it's super subtle and I admire it, but I just kind of think for the time that, especially given how not subtle all his voiceover at the beginning of the movie is, I kind of think that stuff's there accidentally, and that we are supposed to admire his savior complex. But I mean, hey, if that's what you take from it, then cool.
Well, you could admire somebody's savior complex while still admitting that they're the villain of the story.
Yeah. There's definitely big, like, religious vibes to the end there. It literally ends in a church. He gets pierced by a spear, just like Jesus on the cross. He dies on the, church altar after having said, like, you're freaks.
Charlton Heston was pierced by a spear. It seems like I do have it written down. It seems like both of these first movies have a huge religious allegory to them.
Yeah, and the final kind of religious allegory that I picked up on was, like, right as he gets stabbed with the spear, and then he's kind of, like, falling over, and his love interest runs up to him, and he's like, they were afraid of me, and the woman's, like, crying while she's holding him, and she's like, they didn't know, and that just struck me as, like, again, Jesus on the cross when he's like, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. It's just the same thing, but, by other words. The sentence is just restructured. So, yeah, there's a huge savior complex to his character in the first one.
I will say that the Vincent Price movie also has some great action and some really great stage direction. There's a scene in the end where zombies are showing up to Vincent Price's house, but then zombies who had gained a higher level of sentience, who can drive and shit, they come in and chase the zombies off, and then they chase Vincent Price. And there's a great scene where he's running through the church, running up buildings, grabbing guns and shooting back. And then when he finally gets trapped in the church when he's dying, first the soldiers come in, but then the women and the children come in too, and they all are coming in there like there's a funeral procession, and they're all celebrating his death because this is the guy that's been hunting them down and killing them for years. And like I said, this is why I say you're wrong, Hunter, because they had the women and the children come in, and it was just a great scene of these people coming in and celebrating this man's death, and it showed that he was a villain, and I just thought that was great.
Right, but it's more so than just showing that he's the villain to them. I think that some, like, acceptance of that would be necessary to kind of replicate the ending of the book, at least as the plot summary on Wikipedia makes it sound, because it sounds like It says, as the suicide pills take effect, he is amused by the thought that he will become their new superstition and legend, just as vampires once were to humans. So that amusement, I don't think is present.
Well, fair enough, but how can you transcribe that?
Yeah, like it's maybe just the
movie?
guy on Wikipedia. Like we would actually have to read the book.
No, I think I do think that's what happened in the book. I'm just saying I don't think that you can really show someone's inner
Right.
thoughts of, you're right. I agree with you there that the very, very ending, maybe they did not capture the theme, but I do like the idea that Vincent Price is too belligerent to learn that lesson.
Mm-hmm. And like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think personally, if I'm the last man on Earth, there's no way I'm accepting that. I'm not just going to go gently into that good night and just let them kill me so that the new evolution of society can take place. No, I'm gonna, one of my favorite like Woody Allen quotes is when someone asks, do you want to live on forever in your work? And he goes, no, I want to live on forever in my apartment. Like, that's gonna be me. I'm gonna be scared of death, and I'm gonna be doing everything I can to stay alive as long as possible. So I do not begrudge these characters for putting up a fight. Absolutely not. But I think it's such an interesting take on the story to have a character that's like kind of resigned to his fate. And he's kind of like, hey, you know what? I guess this is just the way life on Earth is going to go now. And humanity as I know it is gone. But this next thing is coming. Like Planet of the Apes doesn't have that. You have, is it Charlton Heston?
Charlton Heston did do Planet of the Apes. He did.
Yeah, cool.
No, Charlton Heston, let me say this. Charlton Heston has always been with the shit because Planet of the Apes was wild as fuck. I really do think, because remember, Hollywood.
I thought you were about to say Planet of the Apes was also about race.
It was. Bro, the monkeys enslaving the white folk, that is definitely about race, dude. Come on, man. Even Dave Chappelle, and I didn't even get this from Dave Chappelle, but Dave Chappelle says some shit about that you should put in. Like, he said it on an interview, but nah, it was absolutely about race. Like, monkeys enslaving white people the slaves now. And the thing is, I'm not even sure that it was for us. I think it was a cautionary tale to white people.
It's funny because before I wasn't getting any movie offers, and now I get a lot of offers for like bad movies, like those Planet of the Apes type roles. What? You saw that movie Planet of the Apes with Mark Wahlberg.
The remake, yeah.
Well, yeah, they're both racist to me, man. Like, the first one was like, just get your damn dirty ape hands off me. I'm like, oh, come on, what are you really talking about? Or like, and then I see the new one, I'm thinking this is a more progressive time, this will not be as racist. And then they had the apes was setting the dinner. Yeah, I'm not even making this up, they was eating watermelon. I was like, oh, come on, man. So the apes was eating watermelon. And then, like, later on in the movie, they're running from the apes and, like, running the water because the apes can't swim. Which is like, oh, word. But see, these apes can talk, but they can't swim. And then at the end, it's like, when I seen the ape smoking a Newport, I just got up and
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, because like when I just said Planet of the Apes doesn't have that, I meant that resignation at the end of like, well, such is life. It's okay if humanity dies because now we get humanity 2.0 and they're vampires and they're apes. The Planet of the Apes, movie at the end, he realizes he's on Earth and he sees the Statue of Liberty and he freaks out and he's like, damn you all to hell. And so it's that, it's typical of how anyone would actually behave in that situation. So I don't find it that interesting. I find the ending of the book interesting, where this character is like, hey, he's just more resigned to it. That's what I'm saying. Like more accepting of, the situation.
I mean, it's fine. I agree with you in that regard. I do think that all of these movies are kind of about man's reaction to society in the face of that. And I do feel like with all of these movies, the ending is a huge letdown because they do portray these zombies still as villains. I really would like the movies to be more chilling in the understanding that they really are the villain instead of a sympathetic ending for them. And I guess, speaking of chilling, Which movie would you say is the most scary? Like, honestly, I don't know if that's a question you could ask. If I don't know if we even get scared anymore, but like,
Yeah, I think I Am Legend.
yeah, especially considering like jump scares and
Yeah,
things
I think
like that.
I Am Legend, just because the film language that it's operating in is what we're most familiar with these days. It's the most recent movie.
Yeah.
The camera allows for more close-ups than the cameras in the 60s and the 70s. Yeah, there's a film language to jump scares that we understand. It knows how to build suspense. That said, there are a couple moments in The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price where just Vincent Price's acting is pretty scary and kind of tops all the, the predictable jump scares of I Am Legend. Vincent Price can do maniacal laughter better than anyone. So that's an honorable mention.
He does it like twice. He does maniacal laughter like 2 or 3. I remember texting you and being like, this shit really is terrifying. It was more terrifying than it was in Thriller. This man was the OG.
I love Vincent Price.
Well, let me say this. This is kind of random about Vincent Price that I thought was cool. But I mean, the way it was written on Wikipedia was funny, is that like Vincent Price's daughter was a lesbian, and then like they were like, and Vincent Price was one of the first Hollywood actors to stand up for his daughter and whatever and take a stand. I'm like, that's great. But then in the next sentence said Vincent Price was bisexual. And I was like, yeah, of course. And then, like, say what you will about Charlton Heston, I do think that this guy was Republican. He was president of the NRA, but he was still a member of Hollywood. And I do think that maybe he did have some liberal ties when it came to movies. Because, look, man, honestly, watching Omega Man, and speaking of fear, I'll address that in a second, watching Omega Man was honestly really liberating from a racial angle. Because that was a straight-up blaxploitation movie. He had a romance with a black woman, and I really do think he was cool with that. And I would like to look up the history of this movie because it did feel groundbreaking at the time. But I did think that one of the scariest moments for me, honestly, that really did scare me in the Omega Man was when the black chick... Look, I'm sorry. I only know the names of the 3 main actors. I do not disrespect any of the secondary actors by saying the black chick or the white chick or the kid. Honestly, I think that everybody in this movie did a great job acting-wise. Like, sorry if this is a tangent, but what I will say to this movie is that it was extraordinarily well acted. Mm-hmm. If it was cheesy, it was supposed to be. These guys who were directing these movies knew exactly what they were doing. And even though we didn't read the books, I really do feel like this book was hugely influential because all of these movies took the source material as seriously as they could for the time. Mm-hmm. But anyway, speaking of horror, the scariest part was when that black chick was leaving. Dude, when she like took off that head wrap, and you saw the hair and you saw the skin and the vacant eyes, that was terrifying and heartbreaking all at once. And that is a trope when it's revealed that somebody is infected. That's a very popular trope in a lot of zombie movies. Mm-hmm. When somebody just turns or they reveal they got bitten and they were hiding it. And then her obsession, I really do think that the family was a Charles Manson thing, because I have in my notes, they kept talking about the wheel, the man of the wheel. The wheel, I believe, is the first thing man invented that could be considered a machine. They kept saying the man of the wheel is done, and it really felt like Manson because the lady was super obsessed with that guy. So that was really scary for me. But also, speaking of sex appeal, which is random, Charlton Heston took off his shirt twice in the movie. Seeing that these guys are leading men, do you think that there was an effort to sexualize them in some degree in these movies?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It was definitely eye candy for the ladies. What I was thinking of when I was watching that was that his body would not pass today compared to,
He has a hairy ass chest, though. I think it would pass today.
But I mean, he's also older, so that's fine. Welcome to our podcast of 2 straight dudes talking about topless Charlton Heston. But yeah, he's older, so I guess it's more okay. I mean, nowadays, a man of his age would not star in this action blockbuster.
Well, no, you have John Wick and Keanu Reeves was like 50, and then you have Equalizer with Denzel Washington. Well, Charlton Heston looked damn near 60, you're right.
Yeah, Charlton Heston looks like Willem Dafoe in this. And Keanu Reeves never looks his age. That man has found the fountain of youth. And if he took his shirt off, he would be more cut and he would be less hairy. So I was noticing kind of just the societal, like, body standards for men in this movie. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting.
Speaking of Charlton Heston as Willem Dafoe, I promise you, I swear to God, I was going to mention that to you, but I didn't because I thought I would sound stupid.
Well, they look, yeah, their face
and voice.
Yes, it was uncanny in this one. He looked like a thicker Willem Dafoe in plenty of shots. The way he would say things, the way he would smile, the amount of like gums you see above his teeth when he smiles, I was just like, man, he looks like a thick Willem Dafoe.
Thick with 2 C's, yeah.
What did you think of the scene where Charlton Heston and the black lady, or it's the day after they've just hooked up, and then they're shopping through an abandoned pharmacy, and you see a sign on the wall that says Planned Parenthood supplies, and then she like pulls something off the shelf and she goes, "Are you ready for this?" And he's like, "What?" And she's like, "Birth control pill." And then they both just start laughing and she literally throws it away. Like, I mean, I get it. It's the apocalypse. And so if she gets pregnant, like, great. They want to produce more babies. But just what did you think? Because I thought that stuff like that was maybe an indication of the Charlton Heston traditionalism, that it's not like a, free love 60s hippie movie thing. Like I felt like they were kind of putting down like birth control, where they're like, oh, this silly thing, come on.
I don't even know what that was, but I had it written down because I was like, maybe they were bringing awareness to the fact that Planned Parenthood exists. But it's like after they fucked, they were acting like a bunch of 2 little kids traipsing around, acting crazy. I don't know. I thought that scene was kind of dumb.
Yeah, I get it. It fits the plot where, like I say, if it's in the apocalypse and you're hooking up with like the only woman around, you are going to want to produce more babies to continue the species. Like, I get it, but it felt kind of unnecessary, and it felt like it was showing the politics of the lead actor, or the maybe popular politics for the time, because this would have been shortly after, like, it's 1971, this would have been shortly after the sexual revolution and the invention of birth control. And so it felt like maybe it's just showing its politics a little too much in a pretty unnecessary scene, just to kind of be like, crazy kids these days, I'm still Republican Charlton Heston here.
I don't know. That's one thing you're looking into that I didn't really care about too much. It felt like it just felt like something out of an exploitation movie. Like, if Charlton Heston really had traditional Republican politics, I don't think he'd be fucking a black woman in the first place. But maybe because the movie felt very irreverent in the themes it was trying to portray. So I don't think that any perceived politics of Charlton Heston had any effect on the movie, which I liked. And this makes you want to look into Charlton Heston more, because I think you forget, I don't think the Republican Party has always been this conservative and traditional. I don't think, and it isn't even now. They just pretend to be. So no, I don't think so.
Yeah, true.
I did say there was a scene that I liked in the beginning where Charlton Heston was watching Woodstock, which, again, I think proves you wrong, because the dude was into Woodstock.
He was watching Country Joe and the Fish performing at Woodstock,
What?
Which, if you know Country Joe and the Fish, their big Vietnam song is just the most anti-Vietnam song you've ever heard. It's very catchy. It's very funny. And I wrote that down too, because I cannot imagine Charlton Heston sitting there watching Country Joe and the Fish at Woodstock sing about how much Vietnam sucks. And again, I know I'm just making assumptions about Charlton Heston based on what I know of his politics, which is admittedly not a ton. But it's just funny. It's just kind of ironic. Like, oh, Charlton Heston goes to this theater weekly and watches the only film they have on the projector there, and it's Woodstock tapes, and he's watching, Vietnam protests, basically.
Even I would watch Big Bang Theory if that was the last TV show on Earth. Well, no, I don't think I would.
Yeah, no, I think I would go be hunting antelope in Central Park with Will Smith and hitting golf balls.
Or learning Shrek.
Or memorizing Shrek, yeah, like Will Smith.
What did you think about that scene?
It's very unoriginal, I think, that everyone on the Letterboxd reviews for I Am Legend, they just mention Shrek. Like, they all can't wait to mention the Shrek scene, and they think it's just the funniest thing ever. And honestly, as a kid, it didn't really register with me because I liked Shrek, and I was like, oh, it's whatever. What really stood out to me as a kid when I watched I Am Legend is all of the like random forced Bob Marley inclusions, because he's all over the soundtrack, and then they have a whole scene where the plot stops completely just so Will Smith can talk about his love of Bob Marley. His character in the movie names his daughter, played by Willow Smith, Marley, after Bob Marley, and then that's the opening for how he talks about how much he and his wife love Bob Marley. And basically, it felt like a very lazy way for the screenwriters to inject kind of a moral to the movie.
Yeah.
Because again, the I Am Legend movie doesn't really have a competing society to make any societal statement about. So in the Will Smith movie, what they do instead is they have Will Smith tell the story of Bob Marley and how he was shot at and then went back out on stage like 2 days later to perform like peace rallies, and then they quote him as like, light up the darkness,
Might as well have put up a quote at the end of the movie. What if that was a Will Smith decision? I honestly feel like Will Smith did that.
Could be, yeah. I think he had the power at this point in his career to make decisions like that. But yeah, again, that's what I'm saying. Like, Bob Marley's quote is light up the darkness. And how different is that really than the Dylan Thomas poem, rage against the dying of the light? Do not go gentle into that good night. Like Michael Caine's quoting all over Interstellar. It's the same sentiment of fight the evil of the world. But yeah, I thought the Bob Marley stuff was forced, and they're trying to use him to show like, oh, see what Bob Marley stood for? That's what Will Smith's character stood for.
Because they're not following the book at all, because they needed
Right.
something. They needed some kind of plot, character arc.
Yes, exactly. And so I am much more offended by the forced inclusion of all the Bob Marley stuff in the movie, which did strike me as weird as a kid. Much more offended by that than I am the inclusion of Shrek, which did not strike me as weird when I was a kid.
No, what was weird to me is when he mansplained Bob Marley to someone over the age of 25, and then she like didn't know and she knew who Damian Marley is, and I'm like, you don't know? Okay. We're talking about this so much because I'm assuming out of everything, most people would have seen this movie. I think that most people saw this movie, and it was weird because he's mansplaining Bob Marley to her, and I'm like, even I know who I would know who Bob Marley is, but I mean, like, I think that he was a great, inspirational, influential figure, but I don't think that he's kind of any kind of example that you would use in the apocalypse, because if the apocalypse happened, I don't know if I'd use Bob Marley as a reason to stay sane. I don't know if I'd use any pop culture I wouldn't be saying, Ben Kenobi and Yoda said all this. I don't know. It just felt really forced, almost like product placement.
Yeah, exactly. And you said exactly what I was about to say, which is, the lady in the movie that he's talking to claims to know Damian Marley, but not Bob. Because he's like, Bob Marley? And she goes, she's like, Damian? And Will Smith has this baffled look on his face, and he's like, his father? And no one alive, then, 2007, or now, knows Damian and does not know Bob. Bob is much more famous. It would have been fine if they had that lady just not say Damian and just be like, oh, she doesn't listen to that kind of music. She didn't grow up with a TV or a record player or whatever. Because then...
or a radio.
But yeah, or a radio, because then the next scene is her talking about her religion and how spiritual she is and how she strongly believes in God. So it's like, fine, maybe she came from one of those backgrounds where they didn't allow pop music.
But also, how can you be spiritual and not know who Bob Marley is? Because Bob Marley, more so than any other musician, represented spiritualism.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so then the movie further makes this whole Bob Marley thing dumb, because right after the scene of Will Smith preaching the gospel of Bob Marley, then they argue over like religion versus atheism. And Will Smith, that's the scene where he's like really wants to shake her, but he doesn't. And he's playing the role of the angry atheist, like scientist. And you're just like, I'm just watching it like, dude, you just talked about how much you love Rastafari and Bob Marley. Rastafarianism is a religion. Like, you don't have to be Christian, but like now you're being this angry atheist dude. Just his character's not consistent. The Bob Marley stuff's all forced. There is no person ever who knows Damien and not Bob. Like, come on.
Do you think they were trying to introduce that religious angle because the previous two movies had done it? And do you think that the religious angle in these movies worked? I think because it sounds like it didn't work for you with the Will Smith one. It sounds like it didn't work with you for the Charlton Heston one either.
It was most subtle in the Vincent Price one, and even then it wasn't very subtle at all. But I liked how they did that, where it's just my personal knowledge of, you know, the crucifixion scene from the Gospels, where I'm like, oh, I get it. He's stabbed with a spear. Oh, now she's crying and saying, like, they didn't know. They didn't, like, it's, she doesn't say, I'm sorry or forgive them or anything. But first, Vincent Price is like, they were afraid of me. And then she goes, they didn't know. They didn't know. And there is kind of remorse to the way she's saying that. And so then I make the connection with Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. It's just, it's very kind of, you have to know the story in the Gospels to make the connection. It's not just handed to you on a silver platter. In the Charlton Heston one, it absolutely is, with just the way they talk about it, where you have a little girl.
Well, it's show not tell, isn't it then? Because I think a lot of the reason why I worked in the first one is because they showed him in the church and he was ranting, and it was the symbolism of it that made it so powerful. And not to, but even in I Am Legend, I feel like if they had just played the music during pivotal scenes or whatever, not really discussed it, it would have worked. But when you have to mention it, because it's stuff that your subconscious is supposed to pick up on that strengthens the themes of the movie.
Yeah, I think in the 60s, and that maybe that's a cultural shift too. I think in the 60s and 70s, the fact that they're all playing this character who has a savior complex, well, in the 60s and 70s, that can easily be tied to, you know, a broadly accepted religion in the American audience that will be watching these movies. But by the time you get to 2007, they're trying to separate it from the religion a bit, and they have Will Smith's character kind of look down on that because he's the angry atheist scientist, but he also has a savior complex. It's just absent religion for him. It's just, you know, his religion is positive masculinity. That is Will Smith's religion.
Well, I guess we save the best for last. What I want to discuss is the dog. I was very disappointed that the Omega Man did not have a dog. I even had it in my notes. Where's the dog? I even had it in my notes with The Last Man on Earth with, is there going to be a dog? I'm sad the dog died. I think the obvious question would be, what was your favorite dog? But I think we can both agree it was I Am Legend, because that dog was epic. It was on some Fallout shit. It was like real cool. But I guess the most important question is, what do you think the dog represented in the story to you, and which movie do you think, you know, did it better? Because both of the characters had a different relationship and different arc when it comes to encountering this dog, which is the first like semi-sentient thing that they see for years, or the only thing they've had with them for years. In the case of I Am Legend,
I definitely think the Will Smith movie, the dog in that movie, the dog plays the most pivotal role, and it's sad when it dies. It's still, you know, hard to watch. Sam's great. See, I even remember its name. In The Last Man on Earth, I think that dog's only on screen for like 5 minutes, so you don't really become attached to it. You just, it was amusing watching Vincent Price chase a dog like through a park. That was fun.
Well, I mean, like, I want to look at the amusing part more, but I think that it's a representation of, like, Vincent Price's, and further my argument that he knew he was a villain, Vincent Price's tendency to destroy the things that he wanted or the things that he cared about in that movie, because he chases a dog and what does he do? He kills it because he thinks that it's a vampire. What does he do with the lady? He chases her and tries to get her to come with him, and then he gaslights her for the rest of the fucking movie. Like he kicks her out, and then she keeps trying to leave, and he won't let her. Man, that was it honestly was kind of creepy. But no, I loved, because like I loved the dog in I Am Legend, because that was just a tactical thing right there. I love the interaction I had with the story, but I think that out of these movies, Vincent Price's the way they handle the themes with the dog was the most interesting. I guess we're kind of coming to an end to this podcast, Hunter. So I guess my two questions for you are, which movie do you think best adapted the book? And which movie do you think best adapted the themes of the book?
Well, one more thing about the dog real quick that I just wanted to say. At the very beginning of I Am Legend, it kind of pissed me off how recklessly Will Smith was driving and like skidding the car through New York. And that dog was not, wearing a seatbelt. Like his dog was in the passenger seat. Its head was out the window was open. I know it's all CG, but I was like, this is not realistic instantly, because that dog would be flung out the window and die instantly. And so that made me kind of mad for real. Like I was like, Will Smith, I don't care if the streets are empty. I don't care if you're the only car on the road. You should not be driving that recklessly with your dog in the car. But to answer your question, I think maybe the best adaptation of the ending of the movie is The Last Man on Earth, like we've talked about. But from what I've read about the book, from the Wikipedia plot summary, it seems that the Vampire Society is much more of a presence, and they're much more of a threat, and they're much more, intelligent, sophisticated, communicative. They speak in full sentences, all of that. So I think the Charlton Heston movie is the only one that represents that aspect of it. So it's kind of a mixed bag as far as the different parts of the book that the different movies get right. And then if I were to think which one would I rather rewatch again, it would be I Am Legend. Just because, it's the newest and the film language is the most comfortable for, modern audiences. And it's probably the one that's the most different from the book.
Which do you think is blacker, the Charlton Heston one or the Will Smith one?
Charlton Heston one, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I that's actually the one I would rewatch too. I really like that movie.
They literally say the word honky in it, and my understanding as a white guy is that y'all do nothing if not say honky all day, every day, right?
We did in the 70s. Well, okay, so no, I mean again, I want to be mad at that question, but now when we talk about white people, we be like, they crazy, these white people crazy, they be trusting anybody. So we just say they. But I'm pretty sure that we did say honky a lot in the 70s. It's just so weird to hear it now, because there's really no word that you can call white people that's really offensive. So we just say white people. Mm-hmm. And even that word is offensive now. But I feel like white people have weaponized it and been like, white people are crazy too. But they'll be talking about other white people. Nah, all y'all are crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on Twitter or something, they'll try and shorten it to white people.
Yeah.
YTPPL or something. I don't know how it's spelled, but
it's to dodge the censors. But since white people started saying white people, they put that in the censors as well. Because for a while, whenever we would talk about white people on Facebook or Twitter, you would get banned for that. So then we would use code names so we wouldn't get banned. But yeah, it's pretty silly. But I mean, back to it, I do think Charlton Heston was the blackest movie. That was my favorite. No disrespect to Vincent Price, so I honestly think that all of these three movies were pretty much solid 7s. I Am Legend is honestly my least favorite out of it, because I don't think that it really handled the nuance of the zombie culture as well, even if they might have tried. But I really do enjoy this movie, and I will say that I think that they are massively underrated when it comes to the the film canon of inspiring and starting tropes. Matheson, I don't think, gets enough love for starting this genre. I think that he took the vampire genre and used it to kickstart this, and I think that he did this by taking a fantasy work and making it science fiction, and I think that opened the way for zombie films as we know them today.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Yeah,
And
we've talked for like an hour and a half about 3 movies dealing with a, post-apocalyptic plague-stricken world, and we didn't even mention COVID. That's something. Yeah, I mean, just a lot of reasons these movies could be relevant now.
that we don't even need to go in because it speaks for itself. But yeah, so I'm sure we'll see you guys next time. I don't know how to. Can you end the podcast for me, please? Just this is